At some point in our lives, I suspect every one of us has picked up a long stick and pretended to be a sword-wielding knight engaged in a medieval crusade. But few people would be willing to pack in their jobs, leave home and move elsewhere in order to follow a dream of becoming a modern-day knight. Next month, historic Scone Palace will be the backdrop for the International Medieval Combat IMCF World Championships, a 4-day event that is attracting more than 500 competitors and 500 officials from 31 countries heading there to take part in full-contact medieval battles, duels and team fights in front of 25,000-strong crowds. Picture by Caroline Walsh. Among them will be a trio from the Scottish Knight League representing Team Scotland and taking the championships very seriously, as it's not just their own honour at stake, but Scotland's pride. Becoming involved with medieval combat isn't just an interesting hobby for Jacob Pothcary, from Lerwick, Shetland. It changed his whole life. From the late 14th to early 15th century, tournaments featuring competitive contact for the purpose of sport, with strict rules and regulations, were held, said Jacob, 25. They were a bit like football matches today. Hundreds of fans would turn up to cheer on their favorite knight or swordsman. It was a serious but fun way for them to keep their sword-fighting skills up to speed when not engaged in wars, crusades, or battles, and people came from all over medieval Europe to take part in grand tournaments. The term we use for the sport today is medieval armored combat, as that is the most accurate representation. It is not a reenactment but a revival of medieval sports being introduced to a new generation. Picture by Caroline Walsh. Jacob, who describes himself as a fighter, and will take part in several events at the palace, has been heavily involved in staging the event, even moving from Shetland to Perthshire to devote more time and energy to it. "I lived in Shetland since I was 4 and never felt there was that much for me to do there," he said. "Over the years I was never that sure of myself, but since getting involved with a small group in Shetland I've gained a sense of belonging, socially and as a fighter. It is wonderful being a member of an organization that has given me a huge opportunity to grow as a person. Through the Shetland group, I was invited to attend a tournament. Seeing people take part in duels and in team battles was very exciting, and I thought, this is something I want to be involved with. I went to train with them one weekend, borrowed some kit, had a sword and shield fight and thought, yes, this is for me. A few years ago, I'd never have thought I'd be traveling the world and representing my country in world championships." Participants use historically accurate reproduction medieval and early modern armor and blunted weapons made of hardened steel. Picture by Caroline Walsh. Jacob explained those taking part in the sport, in its current form, use historically accurate reproduction medieval and early modern armor and blunted weapons made of hardened steel to take part in competitive fights. Hundreds of people across the world enter into the fights and battles, which are always carried out on foot. No horses or Game of Thrones-style battles are allowed. Competitors take part in duels, fight in teams of 5, 10 and 16, and there's always a melee at the end when everyone joins in and slugs it out to be the last knight standing. Jacob said, "There's a huge misnomer that all armor is the same, but there's armor for warfare and armor for tournaments. Even in the old days safety was a big issue, so they used blunted weapons as competitors were regarded as sportsmen, the Olympians of the day." Standing tall at 6 feet 5 inches in his stocking soles, Joshua Emerson, 32, looks every inch the part of a brave knight. Originally from Bermuda and a qualified goldsmith and jewelry maker, he moved to Scotland a year ago, partially to pursue his love of medieval combat. "As a child I was always interested in medieval history and grew up on tales of brave knights and battles. My grandfather made my brother and I wooden swords and shields, and we'd pull on old motorbike helmets and have pretend sword fights. After I finished university I moved to London and found a medieval combat group. I went along to try a full day's practice and loved it," said Joshua, who was wearing a replica 8th century Viking-style costume. "I get a lot out of this sport, not just camaraderie and fun. For those thinking of getting into it, they definitely need to work on their fitness levels, as it's all about strength and flexibility. There's no use being all muscle if you are unable to move well, so things like yoga, which I have started learning, help. I'd recommend trying to find someone with a suit of armor roughly the same size as you. Once you put it on it will change you, but if you don't want to fight then there are many roles you can get involved with, such as being a squire or making armor. Try everything and see what you like the most." Dressed head to toe as a knight, Joe Partridge, 24, originally from Milton Leys but now living in Tumblebridge, attracted lots of attention from youngsters and adults while making this trip to Scone Palace. "You do get a lot of attention, it's something you have to get used to," said Joe, who works as a personal trainer and is involved with skiing at Glenshee. Medieval combat is now a major part of my life. While I'm not fully clued up when it comes to the history side of things, the sport ticks a lot of boxes for me as it lets me apply the skills I have. As a kid I was massively into sport, and this evolved into strength conditioning and powerlifting. Participants should have the average fitness level of a mixed martial arts fighter. The hardest part for me is getting my breathing right. My muscles work fine, but the helmet, full armor, sword and shield can add around 4 stone in weight, which changes things. I'm not an aggressive person at all, but I love sword fighting and really enjoy the feeling of wearing armor and the camaraderie you get in being part of a group like this. It's been a hard day's night. To say I jumped at the chance to spend the day with a knight in shining armor is an understatement. What gal wouldn't want to meet a gent of the Sir Galahad variety? The knights I met were as chivalrous as I'd hoped, and invited me to step into their world to have a go at wielding a sword myself, something I found surprisingly difficult. Finding a suitable outfit for me was almost impossible, as all costumes are bespoke, usually made in Poland or the Ukraine, and can cost anything from £1,000 to £4,000 for a full suit of armor, which can weigh between 3 and 6 stone. Helmets are also made to measure, but luckily one gent loaned me his Bashinet helmet, which roughly fitted. Thickly padded inside and weighing almost a stone, it rested on my collarbone, restricted my vision, and was pretty uncomfortable to wear. Clutching an arming sword made of hardened steel and grasping a wooden tournament shield close to my body, I strode out to face my foe, a poor soul who had been volunteered to let me whack him on the head with my sword. Using all my strength, I raised my right arm, took aim and brought the sword down with an almighty clang on the side of his helmet. It left a dent, but he barely moved, while I was left with a terrific shudder running up my arm. You clearly need to be tremendously fit for this sport, which I'm not. Think I'll stick to wench-like duties. The largest event of its kind to be held in the UK, the IMCF World Championships, takes place from Thursday, May 10th, to Sunday, May 13th. Visitors to the family-friendly event can see live battles taking place in the List Arena, in front of the castle. The opening ceremony is at 9:30 a.m. on the Thursday, when competitors walk from the medieval camp to the List, escorted by the spectacular stunt horses, Les Amidono, a sight not to be missed.